Hi everyone, I am Sowdamini and I'm very excited to be here and share my story with you today. I was born in Bengaluru, or Bangalore, a big city in southern India with a population of around 11.5 million people. I was practically raised by my grandparents since my parents worked full time. They dropped me off to school, brought me lunch, picked me up and told me bedtime stories. These were stories of plants and animals personified, embedded in mythology. And there were also stories of my grandparents' simple yet adventurous life on their farm before they moved to the city to take care of us. And I soaked up these stories like a sponge. I couldn't get enough and had to be physically dragged out of their room every night to give them a rest from all that storytelling. As I grew older, the fast-paced city life didn't appeal to me. I was longing for the sense of adventure I felt listening to my grandparents' stories. So by year 12, a turning point in every student's life, I had decided that a conventional career path is absolutely not for me. I was going to study to be a zoologist. This is a funny collection of my photos when I was younger. This is what most of my photos look like. Call them my habitat shots. Around the same time, I was doing a fair bit of traveling with my family, especially the Himalayas, because my dad is obsessed with the Himalayas. And hydro dam projects were in full swing back then. And pristine places I'd visited a couple of years before that no longer existed, and floodwaters submerged entire ecosystems and villages. This was a major turning point for me because as an angry teenager, I decided to save the planet from humans. That anger and frustration drove me for years, but I also developed some very interesting and passionate hobbies and a very important life skill: to crouch and remain motionless to get perfect shots of animals. And here are some results. Very cute. And this is me staring into the distance, probably having my millionth existential crisis for the day. And that hasn't changed. So when I was doing my bachelor's, I had a lot of spare time since I didn't work and didn't have to pay rent. So I volunteered at local NGOs studying human-wildlife conflict, mostly elephants and leopards. I was doing national park boundary surveys and interviewing locals for their perspectives on the issue. Speaking to the farmers and locals in the area made me realize that saving the world is way more complex than I thought. I was conflicted when I realized that they loved the animals and didn't want them to be harmed. I was like, wait a minute, I've got this wrong. I was separating us humans from the rest of the world, natural world, I mean, whereas these amazing people wanted to coexist with the animals all along, and they didn't need a uni degree to realize that. This truly put me on the path to explore ways to promote coexistence with the natural world. During one of our travels, we visited Nepal, and I was exploring a limestone cave, which was apparently very amazing and life-changing for me. I saw walls of calcified shells, and I was obsessed. I had read about life originating in the ocean in biology textbooks before, but this visual reminder was a huge inspiration for me to study marine science, especially the elephants of the ocean, aka whales. So after a lot of technical difficulties, I made it to UTAS in 2016. I moved to Launceston in the middle of winter, and at the backpackers, they gave me the keys to the wrong room. So for a full hour, I thought I had to share a double bed with a complete stranger. Eventually, they did sort it out, and I was quite happy with my bunk bed. And I finally got to see whales for the first time. It was magical. A lot has changed over the years, but my hobbies have remained. And around this time, I was beginning to plan my career quite seriously, and I recognized that working in the space of climate justice, sustainability, and global food security is where I would be making the most meaningful impact and feel fulfilled. So I started my PhD at UTAS around 7 months ago now. And my PhD will be looking at ways to make aquaculture more sustainable using ecosystem-based approaches. A bit of background about aquaculture. It now produces half of the seafood consumed globally, and the industry is rapidly growing. I'll be using Atlantic salmon as my study species and ascertain how changes in its feed composition influences the fish and the surrounding environment. This research will contribute directly to UN sustainable goals. I'm very passionate about climate justice and sustainability, and it fuels my research ethos. So far, it seems like my journey was a bit of a smooth sail, but it wasn't the case. And I would like to discuss some of the barriers I faced as a woman and a person of color, and some of the barriers I'm hoping to address through this grant. Like a person of color role models in STEM, especially women, I feel very strongly about this. I grew up watching Nat Geo documentaries, reading about the primates, Jane Goodall, Diane Fossey, and Birote Galdakis, conquest stories of colonial hunters like Jim Corbett and Kenneth Anderson, hunting man-eating tigers and leopards. These were amazing stories and inspiring documentaries, but I couldn't connect or relate to them or their circumstances personally. Growing up, I didn't see many, or in fact, any women of color working in this field in mainstream media. They may have existed, but perhaps they didn't have access to the same opportunities as the people I mentioned earlier. I also dealt with a lot of sexism in school and uni back in Bangalore. Our male professors constantly told us things like, go back to the kitchen where you belong and not to bother studying because we're going to be married off and have kids soon anyway. But I was stubborn and persistent, so here I am. And as a part of this grant, I'm hoping to establish a mentoring network in a rural school in Bengaluru. The students in the school are from a low socio-economic background. The mentoring network will have local people, mostly women, who have established careers in different fields, to mentor young minds and encourage them to attend school and hopefully university one day. As a part of this grant, we were able to provide learning and visual tools for the students. They all have their own copies of learning materials and textbooks now. And this grant was a timely contribution because most of these kids' parents have lost their jobs due to COVID. So this will ease the financial burden on the parents and contribute to student retention in schools. Oh, big one. To be honest, it's quite impossible to address all the social and cultural barriers affecting girls disproportionately, especially in a big, complex country like India. So I would like to share a story with you instead. Once upon a time, in a tiny village in southern India, two young girls met at a school. They were around 4 years old. One of them had just joined the school in the village, while the other girl was accompanying her mother, who was a teacher at the school. But she went to a private school in the city. During school holidays, the girls played together, climbed trees, and caught butterflies. They both shared a common curiosity for nature. As they grew older, they got busy with their own lives. The meetings got less frequent and they lost touch. 10 years later, the teacher's family decided to surprise her with a visit to the school and pick her up. The teacher's daughter remembered her friend and went to look for her. Her friend's grandmother owned the corner shop in the village, so she began her search there. Surprisingly, the shop was closed. A couple of minutes later, the teacher's daughter gave up her search and asked her mother about her friend. Her mother looked quite sad and responded, "Oh, she was actually married off to someone when she hit puberty." The other girl is narrating the story to you today. It has been around 14 years since this, and I still think about her sometimes, and the what ifs haunt me. What if she was supported better? What if her mother was around or her family were educated? What if I was her? This drives me to do better for myself every day and whenever I can. But there is hope. Right to education is a fundamental human right, and we all can and should contribute to help balance the scales. We are currently doing that and making a small difference through this grant. Thank you very much. Please feel free to reach out to me if you want to talk to me about any of this. Thanks.